The night Vincent Carraro walked into the Harborview Diner, he wasn't looking for a conscience. He was looking for a loose end. The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight, the kind of cold October rain that turned the Portland waterfront into a smear of neon and shadow. Vincent sat in the last booth by the window, his overcoat still damp, his dark eyes scanning the room the way they always did. Exits first, faces second, threats third. Old habit. The kind of habit that kept men like him alive past 40. He was 41 now, and some days that felt like a miracle. Other days it felt like a sentence. The diner was quiet for a Thursday night. A couple of longshoremen hunched over coffee at the counter, an old man in a fishing hat reading a crumpled newspaper, and one waitress, young, maybe 22, 23, moving between tables with a pot of decaf, and the particular economy of motion that told Vincent she'd been on her feet for 7 hours already. She moved like someone who didn't expect anyone to notice her. That, too, was something he recognized. Her name tag said Nell. He didn't look at her for long. He wasn't there for her. He was there because somewhere in this diner, tucked into a booth or waiting by the back exit, was a man named Roy Gifford, a mid-level accountant for the Santoro family, who had recently made the catastrophically poor decision to start skimming. Not from the Santoros, from Vincent. Specifically, from a shipping account that had taken Vincent 3 years to build and another 2 to legitimize. Gifford had been pulling $4,000 a month for 11 months. He'd apparently assumed Vincent wouldn't notice. That assumption was, at this point, the least of his problems. Vincent checked his phone. His lieutenant, a broad-shouldered man named Carver, who was parked outside in a black Suburban, texted him, still in back. Booth 7. Vincent didn't move immediately. He rarely did. He'd learned a long time ago that patience was the thing that separated men who ran things from men who merely worked for those men. He ordered coffee. The waitress, Nell, brought it without fuss, without small talk, and without the slightly nervous flicker that most people got when they looked at him for the first time. That struck him as interesting. Either she was very calm or very distracted. He suspected the latter because when she set down the mug, her hand trembled slightly and she didn't seem to notice. She was already somewhere else in her head. He almost didn't touch her bag. Later, he would tell himself it was an accident, that it had fallen off the stool beside her station when he stood up, that he'd only picked it up to set it right. But Vincent Carraro had not survived in his world by lying to himself, so eventually he had to admit the truth. He noticed the zipper was open. He noticed because he noticed everything. And something small and dark had slipped halfway out of the inner pocket. A photograph, old, printed on that glossy paper from the early 2000s, the kind with the thin white border. He caught it before it hit the floor. He almost slipped it back inside without looking. He looked. It was a hospital photo. A newborn, red-faced and scrunched, wrapped in a yellow blanket. Nothing unusual about that, except written in the corner in faded blue pen, in a handwriting he would have recognized anywhere in any city, in any decade, were 2 words, keep her. Vincent went very still. The diner didn't notice. The longshoreman kept talking. The old man turned a page. Nell was somewhere behind him, refilling someone else's coffee. He read the words again, keep her. The handwriting was small and slightly slanted. The letter K looped the particular way of someone who'd learned to write in a hurry and never unlearned it. He knew that handwriting because he had grown up watching it. On birthday cards tucked under his pillow, on grocery lists magnetized to a refrigerator door, on one last note left on a kitchen table on a Tuesday morning 22 years ago. His mother's handwriting. Bridget Carraro had been dead since Vincent was 19. Car accident on the Burnside Bridge, February. Black ice. No survivors. That was the official story. That was the story he had built his grief around. The story he had carried like ballast through every decision he had made in the years since. He turned the photograph over. On the back, a date, October 3, 2001, and below it a hospital name, St. Catherine's Medical Center, Portland, OR. Vincent had spent nearly 2 decades in this city. He knew St. Catherine's. He had donated to their pediatric wing 3 years ago. Actually, one of those half-legitimate gestures his accountants recommended for optics. He had never known his mother had any connection to that hospital. He sat back down. The coffee was getting cold. Gifford was still in booth 7. Carver was still outside in the rain. None of that had changed. But Vincent's hands, which had been steady every day of his adult life, were not entirely steady as he slid the photograph into his breast pocket. He paid for the coffee and left. Gifford would wait until tomorrow. Gifford would actually wait, as long as Vincent needed him to. He found Nell outside 20 minutes later, in the alley behind the diner where the staff apparently took their breaks. She was sitting on an overturned milk crate with a cigarette she hadn't lit, turning it over and over in her fingers. When she looked up and saw him, she didn't scream or bolt. She just looked at him with those dark, slightly exhausted eyes and said, "You're the guy from booth 3. "I am," he said. "You forget something?" "No." He reached into his breast pocket and held out the photograph. "This fell from your bag." She was very quiet for a moment. Then she stood up slowly, like someone bracing for a blow they'd been expecting for a long time, and took it from him. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was completely flat. "That's all?" he asked, not moving. She looked at him for a long moment. "What do you want me to say?" "I want to know whose handwriting that is on the back." Something shifted in her expression then. Not fear exactly. More like the look of someone who'd been carrying a heavy thing for a long time and wasn't sure whether setting it down would be a relief or the thing that finally broke them. "I don't know," she said quietly. "That's the problem. I found it in my mother's things when she died. 8 months ago." She paused. "I've been trying to figure out who B is." The initial on the note. Vincent felt the air leave his lungs very slowly. "What note?" he said. She looked at him oddly. "On the back of the photo, next to the date." She turned it over and held it out to him again, and he looked more carefully this time, past the date, past the hospital name, to a tiny initial he had missed in his shock. B. His mother had signed it. She had written "Keep her," and she had signed it. He met Nell's eyes. "Where are you from?" he asked. "Originally here," she said slowly. "Portland. I was born at St. Catharines." The rain was picking up again. In the street beyond the alley, a car passed with its headlights on high, briefly lighting everything up. The wet asphalt, the dumpsters, Nell's face, which was 22 years old and he was just now noticing his mother's particular shape of nose. Not identical, but close enough that he felt something lurch inside his chest with the force of a door he hadn't known was there being kicked open from the other side. He took a breath. "My name is Vincent Carraro," he said. Not the Vincent Carraro, not the man whose name made Portland's dock workers lower their voices and city officials stop returning calls. Just his name, flat and plain, offered like something he wasn't sure he'd get back. "I think we need to talk." He didn't take her anywhere alarming. He called Carver and told him to stand down for the night, told him Gifford could have until Friday, then walked Nell to a 24-hour diner 3 blocks away that was better lit and had worse coffee, and therefore felt, he suspected, slightly less threatening. She came without argument. He found that interesting. Either she trusted him very quickly or she had nothing left to lose. He'd find out which one it was. Over the next 2 hours, between refills of bad coffee and a piece of pie she picked at without eating, Nell Parrish told him what she knew, which was, genuinely, very little. Her mother, Joan Parrish, had died of ovarian cancer in February 8 months ago. She had been a quiet, private woman who worked in records management for the Port of Portland for 26 years. She had raised Nell alone. She had never spoken of Nell's biological family, and Nell, who had been told from an early age that her birth mother had given her up voluntarily, hadn't pushed. Joan was her mother. That was the fact she had lived inside. Then Joan died, and in the box under Joan's bed, the kind of box everyone has, full of documents and old birthday cards, and things too important to throw away but too private to display, Nell found the photograph of, and a letter, handwritten, undated, addressed to Joan but never mailed. She didn't have it with her. But she remembered it, she said, the way you remember the exact wording of something that had rearranged your understanding of your own life. "Joan, if anything happens to me, please keep her away from his world. She deserves better than what I could give her. You were always the brave one. Keep her safe. Keep her small. Keep her hidden." B. Vincent sat with that for a long time. His mother had been 38 years old when she died. She would have been 36 in 2001. It was possible. More than possible. The timeline fit. The initial fit. The handwriting fit, in the way that one person's handwriting would fit across 19 years, a little looser, a little more urgent. "Did your mother ever mention someone named Bridget?" he asked. Nell shook her head, then stopped. "Wait," she said slowly. "There was a woman she mentioned once, when I was maybe 7 or 8. A friend from a long time ago," she said. "Someone who had to disappear." She looked at him. She said it like it was sad. She said her friend was brave. He felt something settle in his chest, not warmly, exactly, more like a foundation shifting to finally bear its actual weight. "Bridget Carrero was my mother," he said. "She died when I was 19. I was told it was an accident." Nell stared at him. "I never knew she was pregnant," he said. "Nobody did as far as I know. She wouldn't have told my father. He was already deep in the business by then. And she spent the last years of her life trying to get herself free of it." He paused. "She didn't entirely succeed. She gave me to your mother's friend," Nell said slowly. "To keep me out of it. Yes, and it worked." Her voice was strange. Not angry, not grateful. Just precise, like someone taking stock. "I've been a waitress for 4 years. I've never once been in anyone's crosshairs. Until tonight," he said quietly. She looked at him. He didn't explain what he meant. He didn't need to, because it was already happening, already had been happening, he suspected. From the moment she started digging through her mother's box and asking questions at the hospital records department, which was not as anonymous an activity as people assumed. Someone had noticed. Someone in the Santoro camp, who had old debts with old Carraro names, had picked up a thread. It was why Vincent had received an anonymous tip 2 days ago about a young woman in Portland asking questions about a birth record from 2001. He'd assumed it was nothing, some distant cousin's byproduct, some administrative inconvenience. He hadn't come to the diner because of her, but he was starting to think she'd been the reason all along. "How many people know you've been looking into this?" he asked. "Nobody," she said. "Just me and whoever works in hospital records. That's too many," he said. What followed was the kind of week that Nell would later describe to no one, because she had no language for it, and no one who would have believed her. Vincent Carraro moved her out of her apartment on Friday morning, not dramatically, not with armed men in SUVs, but efficiently, with the help of Carver and a woman named Petra who handled the logistics of sensitive relocation, and who packed Nell's things with the methodical care of someone who had done this many times before. Nell was installed in a safe house in the West Hills with good heat and a well-stocked kitchen and a view of the city that on clear mornings was, objectively, beautiful. She was not a prisoner. Vincent was very clear about that. She could leave whenever she chose. But he asked her to wait, just a few days, while he figured out who had passed her name to the Santoros and why that particular piece of information was valuable enough to share. He found out on Monday. Roy Gifford, as it turned out, had been doing more than skimming. He'd been selling information, the kind of information that only an accountant would have access to, the kind buried in records and old transfers, and names attached to accounts that had been closed for 20 years. He had sold, among other things, the records of a trust account, a small one, opened in 2001, funded quietly, maintained for 22 years by an automated transfer from a law firm that had no knowledge of its original purpose. The trust was in the name of Eleanor Bridget Carraro. Nell. Eleanor. He should have seen it sooner. The trust had been his mother's last act. A modest amount, $47,000, enough for a college education, enough for a start. Waiting for a girl named Eleanor who was supposed to come looking for it someday, funneled through enough legal distance that it would be invisible to the Santoros and the Carraros alike. Bridget Carraro had been smarter about protecting her daughter than anyone had given her credit for. Gifford had sold the name of the trust's beneficiary for $6,000. Vincent found this out on Monday. On Tuesday, Gifford had a conversation with Carver that he would not soon forget, and the information trail was sealed. On Wednesday evening, Vincent went back to the safe house. He found Nell at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a library book she'd apparently asked Petra to pick up for her. Something about marine biology, of all things. She looked up when he came in, calm the way she'd been calm every time he saw her, that particular steadiness that he recognized now as a trait rather than a mood. "Is it over?" she asked. "The immediate problem," he said, sitting down across from her. "Yes." And the other problems? He looked at her for a moment. She was his sister. He was still getting used to the shape of that sentence inside his mind. 22 years of not knowing she existed, and now she was sitting across from him reading about marine biology in his safe house, wearing his mother's nose on her face. "The trust," he said. "My mother set it up for you. $47,000. It's yours, has been yours, technically, since your 21st birthday. The lawyer who manages it will contact you this week." She was quiet for a long moment. "She planned it," she said softly. "She planned all of it." "She was very careful," he said. "More careful than I knew how to appreciate until recently. She wanted me safe. She wanted you free," he said. "There's a difference. Free meant small, hidden. Outside all of this." He paused. She was right. Nell looked at him. "You're not going to pull me into your world." It wasn't a question. He recognized that too. It was the statement of a woman who was taking stock of her options and had already made her decision and was simply letting him know. "No," he said, "I'm not." He leaned back slightly. "But I'd like to know you, if that's something you'd want." Something moved in her face then. Not the tears he might have expected. Nothing dramatic. More like a door opening very slightly onto an unfamiliar room, someone leaning forward to look inside without committing to stepping through. "You're not what I expected," she said. "Neither are you," he said honestly. Outside the safe house windows, the Portland sky was doing the thing it did in October. Cycling through rain and clearing and rain again, indifferent to whatever was happening below it. The city hummed. Somewhere down on the waterfront, Carver was watching a warehouse. Somewhere in the records department at St. Catherine's, a clerk had probably forgotten she'd ever spoken to a young woman with dark eyes who wanted to know about a birth record from 2001. And in a kitchen in the West Hills, a mafia boss and the sister he never knew existed sat across a table from each other, both of them trying to figure out what came next. "I'm going back to work on Friday," Nell said finally. "The diner. I like the job." "All right," he said. "But maybe," she said slowly, carefully, like someone reading the words aloud for the first time, "you could come in sometime. For the coffee." A pause. "It's actually terrible." For the first time in a long time, longer than he could honestly remember, Vincent Carraro laughed. Not the controlled, deliberate smile he used in rooms where impressions mattered. A real one, short and slightly surprised, rising up before he could calculate whether it was appropriate. "I'll come in on Saturday," he said. She nodded. Then she went back to her marine biology book, and he sat there a while longer in the quiet of the kitchen, not saying anything, just being present in the same room as the thing his mother had spent her last years protecting. The rain started again. He didn't mind it. If you've made it this far, drop a comment and let us know. What did you feel the moment Vincent recognized that handwriting? And do you think Nell made the right call, going back to the diner, keeping her ordinary life? We'd love to hear from you. If this story moved you at all, give it a like and subscribe to Mia's Romance Library. There are more stories like this one waiting for you. See you in the next one.